You wake up, and before you even open your eyes, you know that dull, tightening pressure behind your skull, pulsing in time with your own heartbeat, the kind of pain that makes light feel personally offensive. You reach for a painkiller without a second thought. Your ancient ancestors didn't have that option, and the honest answer to what they did instead is somehow both horrifying and strangely reassuring. This is the story of the headache, one of the oldest, most universal human complaints, and the surprisingly aggressive things people did about it long before anyone understood what was actually happening inside their own skull. Let's start with the most extreme evidence because it's genuinely hard to top. Trepanation, the practice of drilling or scraping a hole directly into a living human skull, is considered the oldest known surgical procedure on Earth. Archaeologists have uncovered trepan skulls, dating back at least 7,000 to 10,000 years, found across Europe, Africa, and South America, in cultures with zero contact with each other. And here's the detail that stops people cold. Many of these skulls show smooth, healed bone growth around the hole. That means the patient survived, not just survived the surgery, survived long enough afterward for the bone to remodel itself, which can take months or years. Some skulls even show multiple healed trepanation sites, meaning the same person went through this more than once and kept coming back for round two. Why would anyone do this? Researchers have proposed a range of explanations, everything from releasing evil spirits believed to be trapped inside the head, to treating skull fractures from combat or accidents, to relieving pressure from what modern doctors would now recognize as severe, chronic, unrelenting head pain. We obviously can't ask a Neolithic patient why they agreed to have someone scrape a hole in their skull with a sharpened flint tool while fully conscious, but the sheer frequency of the practice, found independently in unconnected cultures across 3 continents, tells you something. This wasn't rare. Whatever was happening inside these people's heads was bad enough, common enough, and desperate enough that carving into bone seemed like a reasonable answer. Let's move to somewhere with actual written explanations, because ancient Mesopotamia did not treat headaches as a mystery. They treated them as an attack. Cuneiform tablets describe a specific demon called a shaku, believed to physically grip the skull and squeeze. And there are documented incantations, essentially medical spells, written specifically to drive this demon out of a suffering patient's head. Picture that for a second. An entire specialized category of religious medicine existed purely to argue with the thing they believed was living inside your skull and causing the pain. It's not that different from modern people negotiating with their own pain, except theirs came with a name and a personality. Ancient Egypt approached it with a slightly stranger blend of ritual and pharmacology. Egyptian medical papyri, including the Ebers Papyrus from around 1550 BC, described treatments for head pain that ranged from herbal poultices applied directly to the scalp to something genuinely bizarre. One documented remedy involves binding a small clay crocodile, stuffed with grain, to the patient's head using a strip of linen inscribed with a written spell. The logic, as strange as it sounds today, treated the headache as something that needed to be physically weighed down and spiritually addressed at the same time. Belief and biology tangled together, because nobody had any way yet to separate the two. Here's where the story becomes genuinely impressive instead of just strange, because ancient physicians didn't just treat headaches, they described them with a precision that still holds up clinically today. The Greek physician Aretaeus of Cappadocia, writing around the 1st century AD, described a condition he called heterocrania, literally meaning pain on one side of the head, and documented it alongside nausea and sensitivity to light. That is, almost word for word, a clinical description of migraine, one of the most common and most disabling forms of headache humans experience. And he nailed the core symptoms roughly 2,000 years before neurologists had any concept of what was happening in the trigeminal nerve, or the blood vessels of the brain. Centuries earlier, Hippocrates had already documented something even stranger and more specific. Patients describing shimmering visual disturbances, essentially what we now call migraine aura, appearing before the pain itself arrived. These weren't guesses. These were careful, repeated clinical observations, made without a single piece of modern equipment, purely by watching real patients describe real, consistent symptoms. And it wasn't only diagnosis. There's real pharmacology buried in ancient headache treatment, too. Across multiple ancient cultures, including the Sumerians and later the Greeks, people chewed on willow bark to relieve pain. Willow bark contains a compound called salicin, which your body converts into a close chemical relative of modern aspirin. Ancient people had no concept of chemistry, no idea what salicin was or how it worked on a molecular level. They just noticed that chewing this particular bark made the pain more bearable. And they kept doing it, generation after generation, until an entire functional painkiller had been discovered purely through trial, error, and careful observation, thousands of years before a chemist ever isolated the active compound in a lab. So what does all of this actually tell us? It tells us the headache is not a modern invention, not a side effect of screens or stress or fluorescent lighting, though those certainly don't help. It's an ancient, deeply embedded part of the human nervous system, old enough that people were drilling into living skulls to fight it 10,000 years ago, old enough that entire religious systems built specific demons just to explain it, old enough that physicians 2,000 years ago described migraine symptoms with a precision modern doctors still recognize on sight. So the next time your head is pounding and you reach for a small tablet with a glass of water, understand what you're actually holding. The tail end of an unimaginably long chain of human beings who felt the exact same pressure behind their eyes and refused to just sit there and accept it. Some negotiated with demons, some chewed bark, some let a stranger cut a hole in their skull and somehow lived to tell the story. You just have better tools now. The pain itself is exactly as old as you are, as a species,